Hey everyone, off the mic Sports Network here. We are talking Cleveland Browns with some Browns thoughts, and man, some interesting comments from Myles Garrett, one of the great Cleveland Browns ever, and certainly one of the best Cleveland Browns of this era of Cleveland Browns football, which has generally been pretty bad. Joe Thomas, obviously, in that class as well, but Myles Garrett's up there. Defensive Player of the Year last year, just freakish athlete, just does things at his position that nobody else can do. And he has been a great leader. He's rebounded from that really bad situation with the helmet 4 or 5 years ago. He is about as perfect of a leader for this team as you'd want. But some interesting comments that were made by Myles Garrett ahead of their matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals this weekend. He basically was talking about, I'm not trying to rebuild. He's saying, hey, I want to know the offseason plan before, and I want to win and I want to stay with this team. But if it's not a position to win, I may want to move on. So it's a problem here because now the Cleveland Browns, with the albatross that is this Deshaun Watson contract that's hanging over the head of this team. They still have him under contract for 2 more years. He can't play. I've made no secrets about that. He is as much responsible for what has transpired in the last handful of years as anybody. Obviously, the front office and ownership bears a lot of the blame too, but Deshaun Watson, for not being able to deliver on the investment that the Cleveland Browns made in him, gross desperation or not, is a huge problem with this team. So that being said, and this puts the Browns in a really awkward situation. And it leads me to something that I've resisted for most of the season. I've resisted for a while. Knew it potentially, if things went sideways, this idea would have to be broached. But man, I hate this. But the Cleveland Browns have got to trade Myles Garrett. They just have to. Like, that's the reality of the situation. Like, the salary cap, and I know some capologists are saying they can make it work. It's like, here's the problem. They don't have a very good football team around Deshaun Watson. Like, the consensus going into this thing when they made the investment is they were a quarterback away. They're not. Their running game stinks. Their offensive line is deteriorating. Joel Bitonio may retire after this season. Jack Conklin's been injured all the time. Jed Wills is a bust. He's going to be gone. Wyatt Teller's been getting injured, and he's regressing. Like, this team is not very good. Wide receiver position, Jerry Jeudy's been a nice addition. Cedric Tillman can't stay healthy. He's had a tough time being very consistent. But yeah, they got problems. Nick Chubb's out for the season again. The defense in key secondary spots has been very inconsistent. Denzel Ward can't stay on the field. Greg Newsome's very inconsistent. Grant Delpit's very inconsistent. The defense under Jim Schwartz, after being the #1 ranked unit in that capacity last year, they've regressed. So this team has problems, and they don't have very many quick fixes. And what amplified this even more is they traded all those draft picks for Deshaun Watson, and then he didn't pan out, and then he didn't play. I think it was 19 starts that he's made for the Cleveland Browns now inside of 3 years with this team. So if the Cleveland Browns do trade Myles Garrett, and I think there is, they at least have to consider it, and I think they really should, honest to God, really think through this, because you could get a ton for Myles Garrett and really replenish this roster and potentially be in position to rebuild this thing. It sucks that you have to, kind of abandon ship. And it's also just another example of how this team has royally screwed up talented players in these situations. And Nick Chubb is another great example. Yes, he's been injured. Nick Chubb is one of the model citizens of this organization and one of the great leaders of this team. Myles Garrett, you may never get a player as great as him again, but given the state of affairs, I think this team is tapped out. I don't think that this team is going to be a Super Bowl team with Myles Garrett on this roster. It's because of the way they built this. It's because of the bad investment they made at quarterback. It's because of the lack of draft picks that they didn't have as a result of the trade for the quarterback, Deshaun Watson. So now you're caught between a rock and a hard place, and ultimately the only decision really that I think that this team can make that really can jumpstart the next phase of this team and get them to a point where they can be competing for Super Bowls or even be in contention, which seems like a long way off, especially with the way the AFC is structured with Patrick Mahomes still around and Josh Allen still around and just a bunch of great quarterbacks and a bunch of great, I mean the young quarterbacks. Bo Nix has had a great year. Justin Herbert's in the conference. And it's just like, Shador Sanders might be on the Raiders, or, I mean, he could be in the conference or he could be in the NFC. But if he's in the AFC, he's probably going to be on the Raiders. So um, it's a mess with this team. And I've said it consistently on this segment that I've really wanted it to work and push through a lot of this chaos organizationally because of guys like Myles Garrett, because he had to overcome some of adversity early on in his career with that unfortunate helmet incident where he lost his cool. We'll never know the truth behind it. But that situation was really bad. 5 years later, this guy's looked at as a defensive player of the year, one of the best players in the league, one of the best leaders in the league, and just a model citizen about being big in the community, being big with the team. I think he might be a part owner of the Cavs too, as well. But yeah, he's just become one of the great Cleveland sports athletes of the modern times. Obviously, you think of LeBron, but when it comes to Cleveland Browns, it's like it's Joe Thomas and it's him, and probably Nick Chubb is up there as well. Like those are great Cleveland Browns of the last 25 years, and it's really a shame that I think this is going to end. And I think it should end because what choice do the Browns have other than the rotten mediocrity or just be terrible? And they're terrible this year. You're not going to get any better if you don't have picks, and you're finally going to have picks, and they got to figure out what they're going to do. But man, this is just, I'm really sad because when I saw these quotes, it was the first inkling in my head was like, yeah, this relationship with Myles Garrett's got an expiration date on it. And if he doesn't think he's going to win there, he's going to try and find a way out. And the Browns at least have to consider the idea of trading him because that's the player that you can at least get the maximum amount of value back for. But also, you've got to get fair value. So let's just keep that in mind as well as we go through this process. But I mean, we've got a couple weeks left in the season. They're all divisional. I mean, this is just it's not a good time if you're a Cleveland Browns fan. It's all divisional, and then they got the Miami game. The Browns got flexed out back-to-back weeks of primetime games. They got flexed out of the Thursday night hole against Cincinnati. This game was supposed to be on Thursday night, but it's going to be on Sunday. And then they get flexed out of the Sunday night game against Miami because Miami is not very good as well. And, it just shows you how disappointing the season was for this team. So those are my Browns thoughts for now. We'll have a lot more content in and around the team because the other thing that needs to be discussed, I don't think anybody's really truly safe, including Kevin Stefanski. If these are the type of conversations that you're having, because I've not heard Myles Garrett in the 8 years that he's been in Cleveland talk quite like this, because he was there for the dark days. Like he was one of the big draft picks off of that 1-15 season, and then he was there for 0-16. So like, it's just like there's got to be hard conversations about Andrew Berry, Paul DePodesta, the whole front office, Kevin Stefanski, the entire coaching staff. Like everybody's job is really on the line here in the last 3 weeks. And because now you have a conversation of your best player is really thinking about his future. And I don't know if the Browns have a path forward of potentially winning big with Myles Garrett on this roster. And that sucks. Because like I said, off the top of this video, one of the great Cleveland Browns ever. And that dates back to before 1999. He's already one of the greatest to ever do it in a Browns uniform. He's definitely one of the greatest Browns to do it in the last 25 years. But it sucks that we're even having this conversation, but I really think it needs to be had. And I think they need to really consider it. And I think they will ultimately decide to trade Myles Garrett because that's the only path forward I see for this team. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys real soon. Bye-bye.